At a Christmas dinner, as everyone was having dinner, my baby started crying, so my sister volunteered to clean her up. I said, "Be careful." As she came back with her so quickly, I asked, "Did you clean her properly?" And she began saying, "Of course I did. I sprayed a lot of perfume which I didn't need to clean, see it doesn't smell bad." Out of fear, when I tried to grab my daughter, my parents grabbed me and said, "What a good mom you will be, I think you should put more perfume." Dad added, "Some babies just need creative solutions to stop crying." And when the baby suddenly stopped crying, they gave her to me and said, "Here, see, all cleaned up and no sound." I decided to call 911, and what I did next left all of them pale. My name is Catherine, and I'm a 28-year-old single mom. Rosalie's father, Jake, walked out when I was 5 months pregnant, so it's just been me and my baby girl ever since. My family has always been difficult. My parents, Helen and Robert, are the type of people who think they know better than everyone else about everything. My sister Francine is their golden child who can do no wrong, despite being a complete disaster of a human being. Francine is 25, unemployed, lives with our parents, and has never held down a job for more than 3 months. She's also never been around babies and has this weird superiority complex where she thinks she's an expert on everything despite having zero experience. Our parents constantly make excuses for her and enable her behavior, while I've been the responsible one my entire life. I should have known better than to bring Rosalie to Christmas dinner at my parents' house, but I was trying to maintain some semblance of family unity. Rosalie had been fussy all day, which wasn't unusual for a 6-month-old, especially with all the new faces and noise at the family gathering. We had about 15 people there, including my aunts, uncles, and cousins. The evening started off normally enough. Rosalie was in her carrier, and I was trying to eat while keeping an eye on her. She had been a little cranky, but nothing I couldn't handle. I know my daughter's cries better than anyone, and she was just overstimulated from all the activity and new people. About halfway through dinner, Rosalie started crying more persistently. It wasn't anything alarming, just typical baby fussiness, but I could see the annoyed looks from some family members. Before I could even put down my fork to tend to her, Francine jumped up from her seat. "Oh, let me help," she announced dramatically, as if she was swooping in to save the day. "I'll clean her up and calm her down." I hesitated for a moment. Francine had never changed a diaper in her life, and I knew Rosalie would be more comfortable with me. But everyone was staring, and I didn't want to cause a scene by refusing her help in front of the whole family. "Be careful," I said, emphasizing each word as I handed Rosalie over reluctantly. Francine rolled her eyes. "Catherine, please. I know what I'm doing. She probably just needs a diaper change." I watched as Francine carried Rosalie upstairs to what used to be my old bedroom, where I had set up a changing station earlier. The crying continued for a few minutes, then gradually got quieter. I figured maybe Francine had actually managed to soothe her somehow. But then, less than 10 minutes later, Francine was back downstairs with Rosalie, and something felt wrong. Rosalie was eerily quiet, almost unnaturally still in Francine's arms. My maternal instincts immediately kicked into high gear. "That was quick," I said, standing up from my chair. "Did you clean her properly?" Francine had this smug look on her face that I'd seen countless times before. "Of course I did. I sprayed a lot of perfume on her, which I didn't even need to clean her with. See? She doesn't smell bad anymore." My blood ran cold. "You did what?" "I sprayed perfume on her," Francine repeated, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Mom's expensive Chanel." Rosalie stopped crying right away, so obviously it worked. I immediately reached for my daughter, panic rising in my chest. The idea of perfume being sprayed directly on a 6-month-old baby was horrifying. Babies have incredibly sensitive skin and respiratory systems. Perfume can cause allergic reactions, breathing problems, skin irritation, and worse. But before I could get to Rosalie, both of my parents stepped forward and physically blocked me. "Catherine, calm down," my mother said, putting her hands on my shoulders. "What a good mom you're going to be. I think you should use more perfume next time. It clearly works." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, you can't spray perfume directly on a baby. It's dangerous." My father chimed in with his usual know-it-all attitude. "Some babies just need creative solutions to stop crying." Francine figured out what works. "Creative solutions?" I practically shrieked. "Dad, this could hurt her. Babies can't be exposed to strong chemicals like that." But they weren't listening. They were all looking at Rosalie, who was now completely silent in Francine's arms, and seemed to think this was some kind of miracle cure. Look, Francine said triumphantly, she's not crying anymore. Here, see? All cleaned up and no sound. She handed Rosalie back to me, and my heart nearly stopped when I got a good look at my daughter. Rosalie's face was flushed red, her breathing seemed shallow, and the smell of perfume was so strong it made my own eyes water. This wasn't a calm baby, this was a baby in distress. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. What are you doing? My mother demanded. I'm calling an ambulance, I said firmly, already speaking to the dispatcher. My 6-month-old daughter has been exposed to a large amount of perfume and she's showing signs of respiratory distress. The entire room erupted. Francine started yelling about how I was being dramatic, my parents were demanding I hang up the phone, and various family members were either taking sides or trying to understand what was happening. You're overreacting. Francine screamed. She's fine. Look, she's not even crying. She's not crying because she can't breathe properly. I shot back, still on the phone with the emergency dispatcher. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, and their reaction confirmed my worst fears. They immediately began checking Rosalie's vitals and respiratory function. One of them, a woman named Rebecca who seemed to have experience with pediatric cases, looked absolutely appalled when I explained what had happened. Ma'am, she said to Francine, you never, ever put perfume directly on an infant. Their respiratory systems are too delicate. She's showing signs of chemical irritation. They took Rosalie to the hospital, and I rode in the ambulance with her. The whole way there, I was simultaneously terrified for my daughter's health and absolutely furious at my family. Rosalie spent the next 2 hours in the pediatric emergency room. The doctors had to monitor her breathing and vital signs, and make sure there wouldn't be any lasting effects from the chemical exposure. Thankfully, Rosalie was okay. The doctors said we caught it early enough, and while she had some irritation to her respiratory system and skin redness, there wouldn't be any permanent damage. But it could have been so much worse. If I hadn't called 911 when I did, if I had listened to my family and just accepted their creative solution, Rosalie could have developed serious breathing problems or severe skin reactions. The hospital's social worker also had to file a report about the incident. While they didn't consider it intentional abuse, it was documented as neglect and endangerment. Francine's name went into the system as someone who had endangered a child through reckless behavior. While we were at the hospital, my phone was blowing up with messages from family members. Some were genuinely concerned about Rosalie's condition, but others were angry with me for making a scene and calling 911. Francine had apparently told everyone that I was being dramatic and that Rosalie was perfectly fine. My Aunt Margaret called me while I was in the hospital waiting room. Catherine, honey, Francine is beside herself. She says you embarrassed her in front of the whole family and now she's scared she's going to get in trouble. Can't you just call the hospital and tell them it was all a misunderstanding? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Aunt Margaret, Rosalie is in the emergency room because Francine sprayed perfume directly on her. The doctors are monitoring her breathing. This isn't a misunderstanding. Well, yes, but Francine didn't mean any harm. She was just trying to help. You know how she is with criticism. That phone call was a wake-up moment for me. I realized that this wasn't just about Francine's dangerous ignorance. This was about an entire family system that consistently prioritized protecting Francine from consequences over everyone else's well-being, including now my infant daughter's safety. When we got home from the hospital at 2 a.m., I found 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My mother had sent multiple messages saying things like Francine is crying, she feels terrible and you really hurt her feelings, she was only trying to help and the family is very upset about how you handled this. Not one message asked how Rosalie was doing. My father's texts were even worse. You made us look like bad grandparents in front of the paramedics and Francine is talking about moving away because you've made her feel so unwelcome and your mother is having chest pains from all this stress you've caused. I screenshot every single message. I was building documentation not just of the incident, but of their response to it. The fact that they were more concerned about Francine's hurt feelings than my daughter's health told me everything I needed to know about their priorities. The next morning, Francine showed up at my apartment unannounced. I could see her through the peephole, and she looked like she'd been crying all night. Part of me felt sorry for her, but then I looked at Rosalie, who still had red patches on her delicate skin from the perfume exposure, and my resolve hardened. Catherine, please open the door, Francine called through the door. I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry, I really didn't know it would hurt her. Can we please just work this out between us? I didn't open the door. Francine, Rosalie had to spend 4 hours in the emergency room because of what you did. The doctors said it could have been much worse. I can't just work this out. But I didn't mean to hurt her. You know I would never hurt Rosalie on purpose. Can't you just tell them at the hospital that it was an accident? It was documented by medical professionals and social services. I can't just undo that, nor would I want to. She started crying harder. Catherine, please. Mom and Dad are so disappointed in me. Everyone is angry. I can't handle everyone being mad at me. You know how I get when people are upset with me. And there it was. Francine's main concern wasn't that she had endangered Rosalie. It wasn't that she had made a dangerous mistake that could have seriously harmed a baby. Her concern was that people were disappointed in her and that she couldn't handle the emotional discomfort of facing consequences. This was the same pattern I'd seen my entire life. Francine would do something thoughtless or harmful, and when people got upset, the entire family would rally around protecting her from having to feel bad about it. The focus always shifted from addressing the harm she'd caused to managing her emotional reaction to being held accountable. I spoke through the door one more time. Francine, I need you to leave. Rosalie needs to rest, and I need to focus on taking care of her. But Catherine, please leave, or I'm calling the police. She finally left, but not before leaving a note under my door. The note was 3 pages of rambling apologies mixed with excuses and blame shifting. She wrote things like, I was just trying to help and you made me feel stupid by questioning me, and I think you might have postpartum anxiety that's making you overprotective, and everyone thinks you overreacted, but I still want to make things right. Even in her apology, she was still making it about her feelings and suggesting that my reaction was the real problem. The note confirmed what I already knew: Francine hadn't learned anything from this experience. She was sorry that there were consequences, but she didn't understand why what she did was dangerous or wrong. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother asking me to come to family dinner that Sunday so we can all talk this through and move past it. Move past it? I asked. Mom, this happened 2 days ago. Rosalie is still recovering. Well, yes, but Francine feels terrible, and we think it would help if you could reassure her that you're not going to pursue this any further. Maybe you could even thank her for trying to help. I was speechless. Thank her? She was trying to be a good aunt. Her heart was in the right place. Mom, her heart being in the right place doesn't change the fact that she used a dangerous chemical on my baby and could have seriously hurt her. Catherine, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? The baby is fine now. The baby is fine because I got her medical attention immediately, despite you and Dad trying to stop me. There was a long pause. We weren't trying to stop you. We were just trying to keep you calm so you could think clearly. You physically blocked me from taking my own daughter when I could see she was in distress. You were hysterical. We were trying to help. This conversation made me realize that my parents had completely rewritten the narrative in their minds. In their version of events, I had overreacted hysterically to a minor incident, and they had been the calm, reasonable ones trying to manage my emotional response. They had completely erased the part where they prioritized Francine's feelings over Rosalie's safety. I declined the family dinner invitation. I told my mother that until they could acknowledge the seriousness of what happened and show genuine concern for Rosalie's well-being, I wouldn't be bringing my daughter around them. You're being very selfish, Catherine, she said. This is tearing the family apart. No, Mom. Francine endangering my baby and all of you dismissing it is what's tearing the family apart. But here's where my revenge really started. I decided that my family needed to face real consequences for what they did. Not just a lecture from me, not just feeling bad about it, but actual, tangible consequences that would make them understand the severity of their actions. First, I documented everything. I took photos of Rosalie's red, irritated skin. I kept all the hospital paperwork. I recorded the doctor's explanations of what could have happened. I had the social worker's report. I was building a case. Then I started making phone calls. I called Francine's probation officer. Yes, she was on probation for a DUI from 8 months earlier that I don't think I mentioned before. I explained the incident in detail and provided copies of all the hospital documentation. Endangering a child while on probation is a serious violation that could result in her serving the remainder of her original sentence. I called my parents' homeowner's insurance company and reported the incident. I explained that their daughter had endangered my child while in their home, and that I was pursuing legal action for the medical bills and emotional distress. This triggered an investigation that would be documented on their insurance record. I also contacted Child Protective Services to report the incident. I explained that 3 adults had endangered my infant daughter and physically prevented me from protecting her when she was in distress. While my parents weren't caring for minor children, the incident needed to be documented in case they ever sought custody or visitation rights. But I wasn't done. I posted about the incident on every local parenting Facebook group, Nextdoor, and community forum I could find. I didn't use their real names, but I described the situation in detail and warned other parents about the dangers of letting inexperienced family members handle their babies without proper supervision. These posts went viral locally, and several people recognized enough details to figure out who I was talking about. Francine's part-time job at a local boutique? I called her manager and explained that she had endangered a child and was now under investigation for probation violations. I suggested they might want to reconsider her employment, especially since she worked with customers and represented their family-friendly brand. I contacted the local newspaper and pitched them a story about the dangers of well-meaning family members inadvertently harming children during holiday gatherings. The reporter was very interested, especially when I provided all my documentation and expert quotes from the pediatric doctors who treated Rosalie. My parents' church? They're very involved in their congregation, and my father serves on several committees. I spoke with their pastor about the incident and expressed my concern about their judgment, particularly regarding their involvement with the church's family programs and nursery services. I also started legal proceedings. I sued Francine for endangerment and emotional distress. I sued my parents for failing to provide a safe environment and for physically preventing me from protecting my child. The lawsuits weren't about money, they were about establishing legal responsibility and creating a paper trail. The consequences came swift and hard. Francine's probation was revoked after a hearing 3 weeks later, and she had to serve the remainder of her original sentence plus additional time for the violation. 4 months in county jail. She lost her part-time job immediately when the local news story ran. The boutique owner was horrified to be associated with someone who had endangered a baby. My parents' insurance company required them to pay a higher deductible and their premiums increased significantly. They had to disclose the incident on all future applications, and finding affordable coverage became much more difficult. The church leadership met with my parents to discuss the incident. While they weren't removed from membership, my father was asked to step down from his committee positions temporarily, and both parents were excluded from any childcare or nursery volunteer roles. Child Protective Services documented the incident and required my parents to attend a family safety education course to better understand appropriate emergency responses and child protection priorities. The local news story spread through our community and neighboring towns. My parents' neighbors, co-workers, and social circle all learned about the incident. My mother had to deal with uncomfortable questions and comments from customers at the bank where she worked. The story gained attention when a regional parenting blogger shared it on her social media accounts. She wrote a detailed post about the incident, using it as an educational opportunity to discuss infant safety and the importance of trusting parental instincts. Her post got shared hundreds of times within our state, and suddenly the story was reaching parents across our region. Several pediatric safety organizations reached out to me to ask if they could use the story in their educational materials. They wanted to include it in pamphlets and presentations about common household dangers that well-meaning relatives might not be aware of. I agreed, hoping that Rosalie's experience could help protect other babies from similar incidents. The attention wasn't all positive, though. Some people on social media criticized me for pursuing legal action against my own family. They said I was vindictive and that Francine had just made an honest mistake. These comments hurt, but they also revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of infant safety and the seriousness of chemical exposure in babies. The regional attention also brought some unwanted consequences for Francine. People in neighboring towns who saw the story began recognizing her name when she applied for jobs, making it difficult for her to find employment even outside our immediate area. Francine became essentially unemployable in our small town. Every time she applied for a job, employers would Google her name and find the news story and court records. I learned about the full extent of the regional fallout when my cousin David called me about a month after the news story ran. He told me that Francine was struggling to find work because potential employers kept finding the news articles when they searched her name online. "She's really struggling, Catherine," David said. "I know what she did was wrong, but she can't find work anywhere in the region." I felt conflicted hearing about Francine's employment troubles. While I wanted her to face consequences, I also didn't want her to be completely unable to support herself. "David, I'm sorry she's having trouble finding work. That's a natural consequence of her actions being made public. I know you didn't set out to ruin her employment prospects. But maybe you could provide a character reference or something? She's been applying everywhere and getting rejected." I thought about this request carefully. While I didn't want Francine to become homeless or destitute, I also wasn't going to help her escape the consequences of endangering my daughter. I can't provide a reference for someone who endangered Rosalie. She needs to deal with the consequences of her choices, and that includes professional consequences. The conversation with David made me realize that the consequences I had set in motion were having effects beyond what I had originally intended. The regional news coverage had made it difficult for Francine to find employment in our area. While I didn't regret holding Francine accountable, I did hope that eventually she would be able to rebuild her life and learn from the experience. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings were moving forward. My lawyer, Teresa Kim, was building a strong case based on all the documentation I had gathered. She told me that while the financial damages might not be huge, the case would establish a clear legal precedent that Francine and my parents were responsible for what happened. The goal here isn't necessarily to get a large settlement, Teresa explained. It's to create a legal record that shows they endangered your daughter and that their actions had real consequences. This protects you if they ever try to claim grandparents' rights or if there are future custody issues. I hadn't even thought about the possibility of my parents trying to claim legal rights to see Rosalie, but Teresa pointed out that some grandparents pursue legal action when they're cut off from their grandchildren. Having a court record showing that they had failed to protect Rosalie would make any such case much harder for them to win. The lawsuit also served another purpose. It forced my parents and Francine to take the incident seriously in a way that family conversations never could. When you're being sued, you can't dismiss something as drama or overreaction. You have to engage with the reality of what happened and the seriousness of the consequences. Francine's court-appointed lawyer advised her to write a formal apology letter as part of a potential settlement negotiation. The letter was very different from the rambling note she had left under my door. This one was clearly written with legal guidance, acknowledging specific facts about what she had done wrong and accepting responsibility without making excuses. I acknowledged that I applied perfume directly to an infant, which I now understand is dangerous and could have caused serious harm, the letter read. I acknowledged that I did not have proper training or knowledge to care for an infant, and I should not have volunteered to do so. I accept full responsibility for my actions and the harm they could have caused. The letter was exactly what I had wanted to hear from Francine from the beginning, a clear acknowledgement of what she had done wrong and why it was dangerous, without excuses or blame shifting. But it had taken a lawsuit and legal pressure to get her to this point of understanding. My parents' response to the legal action was more complicated. They were angry about being sued by their own daughter, but they were also starting to understand the seriousness of the situation. Their lawyer had explained to them that their homeowner's insurance might not cover them if they were found to have acted recklessly or negligently. "We could lose the house, Catherine," my father said during one tense phone conversation. "Is that really what you want?" "I want you to understand that what happened was serious and could have killed Rosalie," I replied. "If losing money is what it takes for you to understand that, then yes, that's what needs to happen." But the most satisfying consequence of all was what happened at the family level. Extended family members started choosing sides. My aunts, uncles, and cousins were horrified when they learned the full details of what happened. Several of them contacted me privately to apologize for not speaking up during the dinner and to express their support. My Aunt Carol, who's a pediatric nurse, was particularly angry. She called my parents and gave them an hour-long lecture about infant safety and the potential consequences of chemical exposure in babies. She also refused to bring her own grandchildren to family events if Francine would be present. Uncle Mike, who's always been the family mediator, organized a family meeting to discuss the incident. During this meeting, several family members expressed their concerns about Francine's behavior and my parents' enabling. It was the first time anyone had ever publicly called out the family dynamics that had been toxic for years. My cousin Jennifer, who's a social worker, explained to everyone how serious the legal and social services investigations were. She helped them understand that this wasn't just family drama, it was a legitimate case of child endangerment that could have had life-threatening consequences. The family split into clear factions. About 2/3 of our extended family supported me and refused to attend events where Francine would be present. The other third tried to stay neutral but admitted they were uncomfortable with what had happened. My parents tried to organize their usual Easter gathering 4 months later, but only 6 people showed up out of the usual 25. Christmas that following year was even worse for them. They ended up having a small dinner with just Francine and 2 other family members while the rest of us had our own celebration at my Aunt Carol's house. Francine tried to reach out to me several times, initially to argue and blame me for ruining her life, but eventually to apologize. I didn't respond to her messages. When she got out of jail after serving her 4 months, She tried to contact me through mutual friends and family members. I made it clear that I wanted no contact with her whatsoever. My parents went through several stages of grief about the situation. First denial, insisting I was overreacting. Then anger, blaming me for destroying the family. Then bargaining, trying to get other family members to convince me to move on and forgive. Finally, they seemed to reach some level of acceptance, though I'm not sure they truly understand the gravity of what happened. About a year after the incident, my mother called me crying and apologizing. She said she had been talking to a counselor about the situation and was starting to understand why I reacted the way I did. She begged me to let them see Rosalie and try to rebuild our relationship. I told her that I appreciated the apology, but that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I explained that they had physically prevented me from protecting my child when she was in danger, and that I couldn't risk putting Rosalie in that position again. My father took longer to come around. He's always been stubborn and prideful, and admitting he was wrong has never been easy for him. But about 18 months after the incident, he sent me a letter. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, and it was the most honest communication I'd ever received from him. He wrote about how he had always seen himself as the head of the family who knew what was best for everyone. He admitted that he had been so focused on keeping the peace and supporting Francine that he hadn't considered Rosalie's actual safety. He acknowledged that his creative solutions comment was ignorant and dangerous. Most importantly, he took full responsibility for his actions and didn't try to shift blame or make excuses. The letter ended with him saying that he understood if I never wanted to see them again, but that he hoped someday I might give him the chance to prove that he had learned from his mistakes. I didn't respond to the letter immediately. I needed time to process it and figure out how I felt about potentially rebuilding a relationship with my parents. Eventually, after another 6 months and several sessions with my own therapist, I decided to meet with them. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop, without Rosalie present. They both seemed genuinely remorseful and had clearly been working on understanding the situation better. They told me they had been attending family counseling to work through their enabling behaviors with Francine and their tendency to dismiss other people's concerns. They had read books about infant safety and development. They had volunteered with a local children's charity to better understand child welfare issues. Most importantly, they acknowledged that they had prioritized Francine's feelings over Rosalie's safety, and they understood why that was unforgivable in my eyes. We started very slowly rebuilding our relationship. Supervised visits with Rosalie, always in public places or at my home. They had to earn back my trust through consistent actions over time, not just words. As for Francine, she eventually moved to a different state after getting out of jail. She couldn't find steady employment locally, and the social consequences of her actions made life difficult for her in our area. I heard through family members that she was working at a restaurant in Colorado and seemed to be getting her life together, but I had no direct contact with her. The last I heard, she had enrolled in community college and was studying to become a dental hygienist. Someone mentioned that she had expressed remorse about the incident and understood why I couldn't forgive her, but I didn't ask for details. That chapter of my life was closed. 18 months after the incident, Rosalie is now a healthy, happy 2-year-old with no lasting effects from what happened. She's bright, energetic, and has no memory of that terrible Christmas dinner. I've been in therapy to work through the trauma of the experience and the complicated feelings about my family. I've also become an advocate for infant safety education. I volunteer with new parent classes at the hospital where Rosalie was treated, helping to teach new parents and family members about common dangers and safety precautions. I share my story as a cautionary tale about how well-meaning family members can inadvertently harm children when they don't understand proper infant care. Looking back, some people have asked me if I think my revenge went too far. They argue that Francine didn't mean to hurt Rosalie, that she was just ignorant, not malicious. They say I destroyed her life over an honest mistake. But here's the thing, ignorance about infant safety isn't an excuse when you volunteer to care for someone else's baby. When I said be careful, it was because I knew Francine had no experience with infants. She chose to ignore my concern and do something dangerous. More importantly, when I tried to take Rosalie back because I was worried, my parents physically prevented me from protecting my own child. They prioritized avoiding family conflict over my daughter's safety. In that moment, they chose Francine's pride over Rosalie's well-being. The consequences they faced weren't my revenge, they were the natural results of their choices. I didn't force Francine to spray perfume on a baby. I didn't make my parents stop me from protecting Rosalie. I just refused to let their actions go without consequences. If I hadn't called 911, if I had just accepted their dismissal of my concerns, Rosalie could have been seriously hurt or worse. The doctor said that large amounts of perfume can cause chemical burns on infant skin, respiratory distress that can lead to breathing problems, and allergic reactions that can be life-threatening. Every consequence they faced was something that exists specifically to protect children from adults who make dangerous decisions. The probation system, the insurance system, the child protective services system, the legal system, and even social consequences like employment difficulties and public awareness all exist because we as a society have decided that child safety is paramount. I didn't ruin Francine's life out of spite. I held her accountable for endangering my child. I didn't destroy my parents' reputation for petty reasons. I made sure the community knew that they had failed to prioritize child safety when it mattered most. Some family members have suggested that I should have just educated them about infant safety and moved on. But here's what they don't understand: this wasn't a simple mistake or a lack of knowledge that could be fixed with a conversation. This was a situation where 3 adults made a series of choices that put my infant daughter in danger, and when I tried to protect her, they stopped me. They valued their ego and family dynamics over the safety of a 6-month-old baby. Education works when people are willing to listen and learn. But when people physically prevent you from protecting your child and dismiss your concerns as overreaction, education isn't enough. Consequences are the only thing that creates real change. Today, Rosalie and I have a good life. We've built our own chosen family with friends who respect my parenting decisions and prioritize her safety. We have limited contact with my parents under very controlled circumstances, and they've proven through consistent actions over time that they've learned from their mistakes. Francine and I will never have a relationship again, and I'm at peace with that. Someone who would endanger my child and then blame me for the consequences isn't someone I need in my life. I've learned that sometimes protecting your child means making very hard choices about family relationships. Sometimes it means being willing to be seen as the bad guy by people who don't understand the situation. Sometimes it means accepting that love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect and safety. The most important lesson I learned is this: trust your instincts as a parent. When I said be careful to Francine, my gut was telling me something was wrong. When I saw Rosalie's condition after Francine brought her back, every maternal instinct I had was screaming danger. When my parents tried to stop me from taking Rosalie, I knew I had to fight for my daughter's safety. I could have doubted myself. I could have worried about causing family drama. I could have convinced myself that I was overreacting. But I trusted my instincts, and that decision potentially saved my daughter's life. If you're a parent reading this, please remember that your first responsibility is to your child, not to keeping peace in your family. If someone endangers your child, whether through malice or ignorance, you have every right to pursue whatever consequences are necessary to protect your baby and prevent it from happening again. And if you're someone who wants to help with a baby, please educate yourself first. Ask questions. Listen to the parents. Don't assume you know better than the people who live with that child every day. And for the love of all that's holy, never spray perfume on an infant. Rosalie is safe, happy, and thriving. That's all that matters to me. The family drama, the legal battles, the social consequences, and even the ongoing estrangement from some family members are all worth it because my daughter is okay. I sleep well at night knowing that I fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.